This episode of The Trap Set is brought to you by C&C Drums, handmade drums from Gladstone, Missouri. Check them out online at cnccustomdrums.com. The Trap Set will always be available for free, but we rely on donations from our listeners. Please visit our website at thetrapset.net and click Donate.
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to The Trap Set, where each week we explore the lives of drummers. I'm going to play something for you. You've heard this beat before. In technical terms, it's very simple. It's the first beat most drummers learn. And yet, this particular version is instantly identifiable. My guest, Ndugu Chancler, has the masterful ability to take something simple and ordinary and turn it into something singular, powerful, and magical. As I'll discuss with Ndugu, Michael Jackson's Thriller album has a special place in my heart because it was the first album I ever received. From ages 3 to 5, I listened to it on my Fisher-Price cassette deck until the tape wore out. It's the record that set my musical clock. But being called by Quincy Jones to play on the best-selling album ever wasn't the pinnacle of Ndugu's career. It was just another feather in his cap. Ndugu began his professional career while still in high school, and within a few short years, he was touring and making landmark albums with a who's who of jazz greats, including Miles Davis, Joe Henderson, and Herbie Hancock. He went on to become one of the most in-demand studio musicians, recording with Frank Sinatra, Carlos Santana, Tina Turner, and countless others. When I met Ndugu, it was immediately clear why he's one of the most successful drummers of all time. He projects a warmth and confidence that, when coupled with his prodigious musical abilities, makes it no surprise that top musicians and producers call on him time and time again. And now I'm honored and excited to play my conversation with Ndugu Chancler. How you doing?
I'm doing excellent.
Where are you coming from?
I'm coming from home. I had a rehearsal for a Japanese tour for later this summer. We start rehearsing early just so we can casually do it. We go to Japan every year with a guy named David T. Walker, who's another session guitar player. So I'm just coming from home.
Cool.
We rehearse at my home.
Yeah. Well, let's go back. Okay, so as far as I know, you were born in Shreveport, right?
Born in Shreveport, started playing music in Los Angeles.
Okay, so let's talk about Shreveport. What was that like? That was in the 50s, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
1952, I was born. Shreveport was, for me, my grandparents lived in Cotton Valley. We lived in Shreveport.
Okay.
So we had a connection with the rural farming area and the city. Mm-hmm. So I had a mixture of both growing up. Now, when you say Shreveport as a city, you're not talking a metropolis like Los Angeles or Chicago or Philadelphia. You're talking about a small country city.
Right.
But on the weekends, we went out to the country to be with my grandparents.
Now, did you grow up with lots of brothers and sisters?
Yes, I'm the youngest of 7.
Okay.
None of them play music. I had one brother that played in the marching band in high school for a minute, but the others didn't play music.
So all of you are still around? Everybody's still with us?
All my siblings are with me.
Great.
My parents are no longer with me.
Okay.
Yeah. There's an 18-year gap between the oldest and myself.
Right. And that was more common back then. I mean, my mother comes from a family of 11,
Whoa,
and there was
okay.
a 20-year gap.
Yeah.
So you don't see that much anymore.
No, large families are kind of a thing of the past. But it was like a hand-me-down system that kind of worked back in those days. The older ones kind of took care of the young ones, and the clothes were basically passed down. Things were passed down. So, you didn't want for much.
What did your parents do?
My mother, for the most part, in Louisiana, she delivered flowers for florists, and my father was in the floor covering. He had his own business that laid carpet and linoleum.
And what sparked the move to L.A.?
You would ask that, huh? And I will tell you, my father was a bad actor.
Uh-huh.
And back in the segregated, soon-to-be integrated South, he started his own business, and he was very arrogant about it, and they didn't like that. So he had an incident with a white man one night, and he had to leave town.
Okay. What was his business?
He did carpet laying and linoleum.
Okay.
And he had his own business, and there was a department store there called Hemingway's,
Right.
whom he had worked for before. But then he branched out on his own, so he was actually competing with the department store. So it became a black and white issue.
And so how did it escalate to the point where you all needed to get out of town?
Well, he told some people some things that he didn't really need to be telling them in a manner that he didn't want to be telling them with a little persuasion. He had his little pistol with him, and he jumped on the man's car and started doing a buck dance and telling the man that, he was going to continue to do his business and so forth. So,
which was his right to do.
Yeah,
I mean,
but you're talking about the segregated, just integrated South.
Right. So not very practical.
Right. It didn't go over too well.
Now, you say you started playing music out here, but what was your first exposure to music? I mean,
my first exposure to music was in a dream in Louisiana at 6 years old. It just came to me that I wanted to play drums. Mm-hmm. And I started making my own drums out of oatmeal boxes and coffee cans. And when washing dishes, I would use steak knives and things like that. And I would just do rhythmic stuff. I hadn't really been exposed to any drums, drum set or anything like that. I had this thing for wanting to play drums.
And when did you get a chance to really sit behind a drum kit for the first time?
I didn't really get a chance to really sit until I was 13 because we came out here and I went to elementary school and I declared that I wanted to play the drums and the teacher wanted me to play the trombone.
Okay.
And I didn't want to play the trombone.
Right.
So I just sat out for 7 years. And then I went to middle school and I walked in the band room one day and I said, I really want to play the drums. And then band director said, okay, here's some sticks, here's a practice pad, here's a book, take it home, look it over, come back and let's see what you got. And that's how it started.
Mm-hmm. And you figured out how to read the book on your own?
Well, I started off figuring things out.
Yeah.
And then I got help.
Okay. Now, once you started out and the teacher let you play drums, who was that teacher? Was that a very influential person?
Yes. He changed my life and saved my life. His name was Donald Dustin.
Okay.
He started me off. He took me to my first jazz festival. Unbeknownst to me at the time, my sister had taken classes in middle school with Charles Lloyd.
Wow.
Because Charles Lloyd was a teacher at the middle school where this band director was.
Wow.
Now, by the time I got there, he was gone. But the connection was my band director teacher, there was a jazz festival in Costa Mesa called the Pacific Jazz Festival. He took a bunch of us that were trying to play jazz to this jazz festival. And that was my exposure right hands-on with the great artists. I met Stix Hooper with the Crusaders. I met Jack DeJohnette with Charles Lloyd. Steve Bohannon with Don Ellis Orchestra. I saw Buddy Rich, and I saw the Vi-Red Quartet.
And then Stix went on to become a mentor to you later.
Stix was the biggest lifesaver in my life. Stix taught me so much. And part of that was because the Crusaders lived within 5 and 6 blocks of me. So I kind of grew up around them.
Like, when did you make the decision that you were going to go for a professional career in music? When did you know that?
Once I really started playing the drum set, it roped me in.
Right.
And I changed my whole direction because at first I was studying mathematics to be a computer programmer. But once I started playing the drum set, I said, I found it. This is it. This is what I want to do.
Were your parents supportive of that? It seems like everybody else
was totally supportive of
okay.
that. My father wasn't that, and then he left when I was 13.
Okay.
But my mother was 300% behind me for whatever. Because at first I thought I wanted to play Little League ball at 8.
Mm-hmm.
But once I started playing the drums, she always knew where I was. She always knew what I was doing.
Right.
So she was totally supportive.
Right, yeah. That's how my parents were, too.
Yeah.
So now the band director became a mentor right around the time when your father
Yes,
split.
definitely.
And did you find, I mean, that's 13 is like a crucial point
Very
in your
much
life
so.
as a young man.
Yes.
So did you find that you were gravitating towards these guys and seeking out mentors in life through
No,
music?
I was gravitating more towards the music, and through the music, I was being mentored
Yeah.
and guided.
So from your band director on, you kind of moved on to Styx. He was your next big mentor, right?
Yes.
And how old were you around that time? You were
14,
14?
15, 16.
Were you good by then?
I was getting there.
Uh-huh.
By 16, I was good.
Right.
There were two guys in town that were like the stellar artists, and that was myself and a guy named Woodrow Sunship Theus.
Okay.
We were like the local hot shots, 15, 16 years old.
Right. So how did you get to that point at such a young age? I mean, did you ever, it seems like you knew this is what you wanted to do from a dream, and you had some innate sense of rhythm that you just knew when you were banging on pots and pans.
But I
as
spent a
young kid.
lot of time with it. And then there was another drummer that was a semester ahead of me. And by the time we got to high school, he had seniority over me playing in the jazz band, which forced me to play percussion in the jazz band and also in the orchestra, which was a great thing. I found out later on that he couldn't afford drum lessons. I knew I couldn't afford drum lessons. He shared his drum lessons with me every Monday. I didn't find out until we were adults that the teacher was teaching him free, and part of the trade-off was that he was to share it with someone else. So he shared it with me. His name was Raymond Pounds, and Raymond Pounds shared his lessons with me every Monday. So I was taking lessons by proxy.
Did you then feel an obligation to mentor other people
Yes.
once you were more established?
You know, everything I got, people gave to me. And even I had two band directors. When we got to high school, my middle school band director moved over to the high school because it was a brand new high school. They brought in another guy by the name of Frank Harris. They became my life support, my saviors. And all of these guys taught me to share, to give, and to receive.
So you say you were good by the time you were 16. You were
Yes.
one of the hot shots.
Yeah.
What was your first big break? Were you working professionally by that time?
I joined the union at 16. I'd recorded an album with the Harold Johnson Sextet. I made Union Scale, and then I started playing around town.
What was Union Scale back then? This is maybe
Like
late 60s.
$90.
Which is a lot of money in the 60s for a high school kid.
Yes.
What did you spend that money on?
I actually paid the mortgage on my mother's house.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so is that kind of so that was the first big session. And then how did it go from there?
Things started picking up. I started working with Willie Bobo while I was in high school. Right.
How did you hook up with him?
Reggie Andrews, the guy that was teaching at Locke with the jazz band, was working with Willie Bobo.
After college, is that when you started actually recording with Herbie?
Well, I actually did Mwadisi while I was in college because I didn't join the band, but Herbie, being a man of his word, first off, I bailed Herbie out of a gig at the Forum, opening for the Iron Butterfly.
Okay.
It was no less than 3 weeks after graduation from high school. They came out here without a drummer, and they had heard about me through Walter Bishop Jr. But he came out and the sextet played the Forum with the Iron Butterfly, and I played the gig. So he asked me to join the band, and I said, well, no, Herbie, I have a scholarship to go to college. I can't do that. He said, well, we'll get another drummer to join the band, but when we make the recording, since you bailed us out, we'll use two drummers. And that's how the two drummers on Mwadisi was formed.
You and Billy Hart.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You go through college, and what was your next step after that?
Going through college, played with Freddie Hubbard, Got fired.
What, when you were in college, you were playing with him?
Yeah, played with Freddie Hubbard and got fired.
What did you get fired for?
Freddie Hubbard said, you can't have but one star in a band. You can't have two stars in a band.
Uh-huh.
It's my band. If you want to play like that, get your own band.
Wow.
Shelly Mann was also a great mentor of mine. Great mentor of mine. So I would play in a lot of the pickup bands at Shelly's Manhole. So I played with Thelonious Monk, Joe Henderson, Donald Byrd, Eddie Harris, James Moody. You know, a lot of the guys that needed rhythm sections here in L.A., I would come and be the drummer for them.
So what did it feel like to be on the road with Miles as a college student?
I was a nervous wreck.
How did he treat you? I mean,
he treated me like a king.
Okay.
I had never been treated like that before. Miles Davis taught me how jazz musicians could be treated, should be treated, and would be treated if the band leaders had that kind of cachet. Mm-hmm. We flew first class. He paid us great money. We had roadies. It was a beautiful thing. Somewhere
over that tour with Miles, did you feel like, by the end of it, did you feel like supreme confidence? Did you feel...
No. Because Tony Williams and Jack DeJohnette were like gods to me at that point. And after seeing Tony Williams' Lifetime, I didn't think I was nowhere near those guys.
When did you see Lifetime?
I saw Lifetime out here. When Tony left Miles, I saw the first band with John McLaughlin, Larry Young.
Where was that at?
Shelly's Manhole.
Okay. Wow. How did you feel after you saw that?
I didn't feel like I was a good drummer. I stopped playing for 2 weeks. I said, if this is what drumming is, I don't think I'm there.
Was there a time where you felt like you came into your own, where you felt like you had kind of developed a style that felt like you?
Yeah, when I started playing with George Duke.
Right.
And that started in 72. And that's when I started realizing what I had, because we started recording a lot together, just the two of us. And that's when I could really hear.
And that kind of led to the Weather Report stuff, right?
Well, Alice Coltrane led me to Santana.
Okay.
Santana led me to Weather Report. And when I say that, I was with Santana when I recorded Weather Report.
Got it.
And Jean-Luc Ponty. I was still with Santana.
How was that experience?
Santana was the greatest experience for growth in learning about rock and roll and that whole other idiom of music and presentation.
What specifically did you learn from that?
How to captivate an audience on any level, a large audience.
Right.
How to play drum solos in arenas and stadiums and get the people into you.
Mm-hmm.
How to use sheer energy to keep a crowd in the palm of your hands for 2 hours.
I mean, at this period of time, it seems like there was somewhat of a break between the generation that was a little bit older than you, who came up doing bebop, and then what you guys were doing. And it seems like there was definitely an old guard that was very resistant to the Santanas.
Well, that started with Miles.
Yeah.
That started with Miles. The old guard was very resistant. And Miles said something to us in Venice. We went in concert, Teatro, I want to say Teatro La Fenice, but that may not be the one. But we were in Venice. The equipment had gotten there late, so we started the concert late. People were throwing things at us and all of this. And Miles Davis turned around to all of us and said, play through it. That's the first time I'd ever heard that. And what he was telling us was, if you believe in what you're doing, deliver. They will eventually believe as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that released me from being constricted by the old guard.
Mm-hmm.
And that opened me up to a whole new thing of follow your heart and do what you really believe, and do it with integrity and honesty, and they'll come along.
Right. Around this time, you were also kind of getting started as a songwriter, correct?
Yes, I started writing songs with Harold Land and George Duke, and then I started doing it more and more and more.
How do you write? I mean,
I write on the piano.
Okay.
I don't write on the drums. The drum beat is the last thing I think of.
Right.
I actually sit down to the piano and write all my songs.
Do you think it's gotten any easier as you've become more experienced over the years?
Definitely.
It has?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, that's good to know.
Well, it's easier now because I have a little more command of the piano. I have a little more melodic sense, and I know how to approach it from whichever angle I'm coming at it at. Whether I'm coming from the harmonic or the melodic or the rhythmic, I know which way to approach it to get somewhere.
Mm-hmm. After the George Duke, or actually during your time with George Duke, you kind of got signed as a solo artist, correct?
Yes.
And this was also probably during your tenure with Santana, too?
Well, it was a little after Santana.
Okay.
All through CBS, because we ran across some of the same guys. I was doing Santana, but I was doing the George Duke records, and then the George Duke records took off. Yeah. And I had co-written a couple of the songs on the record Reach For It, and that was the one that took off for him. And that was the one that kind of introduced the world to me as a songwriter and some of the other things I could do. And by the time we did Don't Let Go, Epic had some interest in me as well. Mm-hmm. And that's how I got signed.
And you've basically been working steadily since then.
I've had a great run. I didn't have a good run. I had a great run.
Have you ever had a period where you felt like things were slow or you wished you were working more?
I had a period where I thought musically I was stagnant.
Yeah. When was that?
In the late 80s.
How did you get out of that? Did you just play through it?
I started listening to a lot of jazz and playing more jazz, more traditional jazz.
Going
just
back.
to free myself up. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who were you listening to? Who did you go back to?
I listened to Chick Corea. I have a group of records that to this day still inspire me. I do Miles from Fillmore. I do Nefertiti. I do Chick Corea, Tones for Jones Bones. I do Herbie Hancock, Speak Like a Child, and then Empyrean Isles and Maiden Voyage. And then I listen to Marvin Gaye. I listen to Minnie Riperton, Come to My Garden. Those are like my inspirational albums. And then I listen to a boatload of Milton Nascimento. Mm-hmm. And from there, it brings me back.
So your first kid comes in the same year that you record Thriller, right?
Yes.
How did that come about? How did that record?
I was working with Quincy a lot at that point. I was one of the 5 guys that Quincy called for drums. So I did like James Ingram, Patty Austin, James Ingram, Michael McDonald, Donna Summer, George Benson, Frank Sinatra, all those things for Quincy. And my number just came up for Thriller. Mm-hmm. JR had done Off the Wall.
Off the Wall, yeah.
My number just happened to come up for Thriller.
Do you remember much about that session?
I remember everything about that period.
To your recollection, did it feel like a special session? It felt like even in the midst of recording with Sinatra
I'll share something that the world doesn't know. There are a lot of rumors that are around about the recording of Billie Jean. But the night that we recorded Billie Jean, first of all, at the time that we were doing Thriller, I was producing with my partner Reggie Andrews, an artist by the name of Rocky Robbins. So I was producing during the day. And Quincy was calling me to do the sessions for Thriller. So I would go over and do the sessions for Thriller. The night we recorded Billie Jean was my son's mother's birthday, and I had a birthday party for her at my house, but that I was late to because I was recording. And some of the guests said, "How dare you come late, blah, blah, blah."
Were you married at the time?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I told them, I said, I think I've just done the most incredible thing in my career tonight.
Wow.
It felt like that.
So when you were tracking it, was he laying down vocals or was there already a guide track?
There were some guide vocals laid already on a couple of the tunes. Like I remember walking in the studio one night before my overdub because we had all three studios at Westlake going at the same time. He was working on the E.T. Storybook album. They were doing horns and synths in another studio, and then I'd be in another studio. So we were round robining. I would go and watch him do vocals. Spielberg, Larkin Arnold, Clarence Avant, all those guys would be in there, and then Quincy'd come over to me, and Michael would come over to me while I'm doing the drum overdub. So there were scratch vocals on a lot of the things that I heard, and it just felt special. It was different. It felt special.
Were you recording by yourself?
Yes.
Okay. So there was scratch vocals and maybe some scratch keyboards or something?
There were a bunch of instruments. A lot of the instruments were there.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there was drum machine during that time.
Which drum kit did you use?
I used my Yamaha Jacaranda kit.
Okay.
Which is now in a museum in Indianapolis for 2 years.
And so that album comes out in 83, right? Or did
Yes.
it come out 82?
I want to say 82, but it might be 83.
I can barely remember. But it was the very first record that I ever owned, for sure.
Really?
Yeah, my mother got it for my birthday. I can still remember I was born in 80, but I can still remember when I got that on cassette tape in maybe 83, 84.
Okay.
I got it for my birthday. I had gone down for a nap, and my mom woke me up and said, "Hey, Michael Jackson dropped by. He wanted me to give this tape to you." And I believed her.
Good.
When your son was coming up, were you touring a lot?
I started off touring a lot because I joined the Crusaders. So his first, from 82 to 84, I was on the road all the time. And then come 85, I started to realize that I needed to start thinking about staying home a little more.
And you're at USC now.
I've been at USC for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you must really enjoy teaching and
I
connecting
love
with
teaching
people.
because it feeds me a pulse of what's happening.
Now, I haven't had a chance to check out your book yet, but you have a book called Pocket Change, right?
Pocket Change is out now. I'm working on a new book called A Musician's Best Friend.
What's the musician's best friend?
The world.
Ah, interesting.
In order to be successful in music, you have to embrace the world. And I talk about every aspect of that, from starting off playing to all of the people that will help you become a success.
Do you think it's possible to teach anybody how to play drums?
Most people. You can teach anyone anything if they're open and receptive
Right.
to the learning process.
Right.
And they humble themselves to the learning process.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great thing to end with. Before we get going, do you want to talk about any ongoing projects that you have or anything that you want to promote?
Well, right now I have a trio project that I've been working on for the last year and a half. It stemmed from Three Brave Souls, but it is catapulted now to the Ndugu Trio. And I have two phases. I have one phase that it's myself, Patrice Rushen, and Rhonda Smith. And the second phase is myself, Patrice Rushen, and Alfonso Johnson. And all of the music is music and compositions that I've written. So it's an interesting situation, and we go from acoustic to electric to fusion to funk to jazz. We kind of cover. I play vibes on some of the numbers, and we just kind of stretch out and do a lot of the things that I do that I don't get to do with other people.
You've been playing a lot of vibes lately.
Yeah,
in particular.
the whole melodic thing is a way for me to express what I don't get to express on the drums.
Mm-hmm. And you got a chance to work with lots of the greatest vibe players over your career, too.
Yeah, I've played with Roy, I've played with Bobby Hutcherson, played with Lionel Hampton.
Gates.
Yeah. So, that's a part of me. And it's funny, I worked with Al McKibben one time, and Al had worked with Lionel Hampton, and he encouraged me. He said, man, you got a gift, just like Gates had, man. You need to do more of this. So I've been trying to do more of that and pursue that.
Well, Ndugu Chancler, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm glad to have been here.
Great. It's been an honor.
Damn, you did your homework, man.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set. And visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Tune in next week to hear my conversation with Brooklyn mainstay Kid Millions.